Let's start. Thank you very much for joining in. We're going to start with first off correcting our motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. And as I said before, if you don't feel Buddhist at this point in time, that's completely okay. If you want to correct your motivation in a way that works for you, then think that you're going to open your heart, open your mind as much as you can, and maybe find some things that would be of of help to you as much as possible. For us as Buddhists, when we generate a motivation with refuge, we make sure that whatever we do, either when we sit in a meditation session, or when we read a book, when we have a conversation with friends, so when we engage others with Buddhist practice, whatever we do becomes in itself a Buddhist practice. Even listening to teachings become a Buddhist practice. And when we also engender great compassion, thinking of all living beings that extend to the reaches of space. And when we think for their end, I'm going to make my mind perfect, free of all faults, and be endowed with all positive qualities, we also make sure that are listening to the Dharma, whatever practice we do, whatever we think of becomes a Mahayana Dharma, a Mahayana practice. And as such, it contributes to our own state of Buddhahood, future Buddhahood. So take just maybe a minute or a few seconds to calm your mind. Make sure that the body feels right, comfortable, at ease. And turn your attention to the breathing cycle and count 10 breaths. And if you can, look at breathing in and breathing out as your point of focus, with a mind that is trying to find the right balance between being too tight and too relaxed, using the breath as an anchor for a mind that can become more and more focused and more relaxed for 10 breaths. And in correcting our motivation for today with refuge and bodhicitta, thinking that we're trying to find tools for reducing anger, reducing attachment, working towards a final goal to completely eliminate them. We can think that it is possible because none of my afflictive emotions is ingrained within the nature of my mind. Really, the nature of my mind is not anger. I'm not a hateful person, not an angry person, not a resentful person. And while it is true that from time to time those afflictive emotions control my mind And sometimes it seems as if it is impossible to control my mind, not only with anger, but also with attachment and dissatisfaction and jealousy and pride and other afflictive emotions. Still, they're not ingrained, they haven't entered into the very nature of my mind, and therefore I can do something about it. And also, everyone around me, everyone that I come in contact with, even those that seems to be horrible people, controlled by afflictive emotions, even they have a mind that is free from inherent anger, inherent attachment, jealousy, pride, and such. And so, everyone, given the right circumstances, cause, and conditions, can do something about their mind. And so, for us, as we take care of our mind, we start in the Buddhist way with finding confidence and trust in the Buddha as the teacher, the teaching of the Dhamma, and also the community of Sangha. Not only those around us, but we can think of the wide Sangha, starting from the time of the Buddha for 2,500 years. People across Southeast Asia and also now in other places have been putting the same techniques into practice, developing realizations, purifying the minds of stains, and transmitting those teachings in the form of realizations and scriptures for one person to the next, making the teachings accessible to us, for us to our Sangha. So in the heart, we find a sense of trust and confidence in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Trusting that we can also become Buddhas. We can embody the Dhamma. We can become Sangha, those who embody the teachings of realizations and scriptures for the welfare of everyone around us. The nature of refuge is trust and reliance upon the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So thinking of it, we're going to say, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. But the collections I gather through generosity and so forth, and I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the collections I gather through generosity and so forth, I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the collections I gather through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. All right. So we had a really nice discussion last week. Nice discussion about attachment and different ways to reduce our attachment, work long term on reducing the power of our sense of attachment and dissatisfaction and clinging and so forth. I think that one of the discussions that we had was regarding the difference between love and attachment, which is, I think, always challenging because it seems that for us it's difficult to really break down, break apart the connection between attachment and love. It is possible, but also very difficult. And something that when we attend to takes probably years and decades to go through, but it's okay. We have time. You know, if we don't manage to do it completely in this lifetime, we can also work towards doing it in future lifetimes and beyond. And so As I said before, attachment is always involved with superimpositions, with exaggerations, with making something be wholly perfect, not being able to see any problems, any faults, and so forth. And so when we think about it in terms of the relationships that we have with others, of course, others have wonderful qualities, good qualities, but sometimes we still get involved with a great deal of exaggeration. One of the exaggerations that we get involved with is thinking that our happiness is within the other person, in that happiness is not something that I can develop within my mind in a way in which I rely upon myself rather than just completely surrendering to finding happiness within others. And then we think that since my happiness is completely ingrained or imbued within another person, if I don't see them, if I don't have them in my life, if I don't have a particular type of relationship with them, there's no way that I can be happy. So this is the type of attachment that we sometimes have in relation to others. And love, the meaning of love is wanting really for the other person to have happiness and also to have the cause of happiness. This is love from a Buddhist perspective. And so, in thinking of developing love without a sense of attachment, well, I think that we have a seed or a grain within us for developing that sense of love and care for others, because those of us that have been parents, those of us who are parents, we can recognize that the type of love that we have to our children is pretty much like that. We want them to be happy, we want them to be well, we want them to be safe, we want them to have self-confidence, we want them to be right. And it's not necessarily about ourselves, although sometimes it is also, about ourselves, but still the type of attitude that we have to our kind of very children is symbolic of love that is untainted. So we have a grain, we have the grain for untainted love. And if we can find ways throughout our life to work on developing that sense of love and attitude towards others, even the people that are in our life, close relationship with, in thinking that may they be happy, may they be free from suffering, when they find happiness and satisfaction and success and meaning in their life, may they be able to stay away from harmful tendencies, destructive behavior, and so forth. And I'm not going to lecture them or tell them what to do, but I'm going to find ways to work with them and also to work with myself in order to reduce those tendencies. How wonderful it would be. And so we have the possibility, the ability to do so. It's not easy. It takes years to do it, but if we give ourselves the time to do it, but also if we learn to deal with disappointment with ourselves, we have high expectation of ourselves to be able to master it within a few months, a couple of years. And I think that, at least for me, over the years, what I've came to terms with is being able to cut myself some slack when I fail, when I discover that my own attachment, my own anger, my own resentment reared the head again. And I have to, again, look at my mind and set my intention and motivation and be able to kind of forgive myself in some sense when anger, attachment, and so forth still work on my mind. So if I set long-term goals, long-term expectations, and also being able to acknowledge that afflictive emotions still work on my mind, work in my mind, I can, I guess, put to rest expectations that are unrealistic of myself to be able to be perfect within a short span of time. And think that, well, still happens. I will continue to work on my mind, continue to apply antidotes, and on the long term, I will be able to reduce the power of my afflictive emotions. So that's how I thought that I wanted to start today with speaking again about love and attachment. There were a couple of things that were left from our previous session with respect to attachment, antidotes or remedies to attachment. Um, we spoke of thinking of the faults of samsara and the faults of attachment, meditating on impermanence, meditating on the unattractive aspects of the object. Um, Towards the end of our previous session, I said that often it is said that when you look at Buddhist scriptures, that when you meditate on the unattractive aspects of the object, you often get an explanation that is coming from the point of view of a male monastic that is trying to reduce the sense of desire and either sexual desire or emotional desire to another person. And of course, Buddhist scriptures being written hundreds of years ago, so 2,500 years ago, they often, the common description is describing the type of relationship between a man and a woman. So yeah, we can find ways to be flexible in our mind and make it more suitable to our situation. So if you're a woman, you can just kind of turn the explanation on its head and think of trying to use it um, in a way that is suitable for you if you're attracted to another man. But you can also, of course, now this quite common and acceptable to have other types of relationships or same-sex relationship. You can also do it exactly in the same way. So that's being creative, but it doesn't take a lot of time and effort to be creative in this way. But also, I think that there are other things which I'm attached to, not sexually, but still I can think of um, the unattractive aspects of the thing in order to reduce the power of attachment. Like, for example, um, in thinking of, for example, getting a new car straight from the shop, straight from the factory. And when I think about getting this new product, I have that sense of excitation, excitement happening in my head, thinking of how pleasant and wonderful and comfortable and full-blown happiness I will get from having this brand new car. But then, me personally, I don't like doing stuff manually. I don't like fixing cars. I don't like fixing things. I don't like changing tires. I don't like replacing oil. I have a good friend in Australia that for years was trying to man me up, trying to convince me to change oil in my own car. Coming up with statements like, he's now in his early 80s. So he used to come up with statements like a real man is someone that can change oil in their own car. It did not work on me. I'm not a real man in that sense. If I can pay someone to do all that stuff, I'd be happy to wash my hand clean from all of those things. So then when I think of, again, going back to the point of being creative in thinking of the unattractive aspects of the object, this is for me unattractive. So thinking that, yeah, I can buy something and it might look nice and shiny from the from the outside, but inside it's still not nice. There are problems and and disappointment and a sense of discomfort or malaise that will come with buying something that is bound to break apart, that will disintegrate, will give me problems and issues and discomfort. So I think that maybe that's one way that you can be creative with thinking about teaching such as this. Any other thoughts before we move on? All right. Anyway, so a couple of points in relation to selflessness, in relation to attachment, sorry. Meditation and selflessness and meditation and generosity, again, are wonderful tools as remedies to attachment. So meditating on generosity, before we get to attachment, meditating on generosity is also a powerful tool that can work long term, better rather than working in short short time span or short intervals. So meditating on generosity means that in our heart we give rise to the intention to give. And that intention to give can be developed over time to be greater and greater. There are great Buddhist meditations, and I think that many of you have heard about meditating on giving and taking, in which we imagine that we give whatever we have, we give it to others, and we try to give them in our mind without any sense of loss. And so when we meditate on giving in this way, we meditate on generosity. Long term, it works as an antidote to attachment, because when we start with, first of all, meditating on giving small things, things that we don't find it that difficult to give up, we create new habits with giving. And over time, we start to increase our ability to give. We increase our meditation. The meditation often is described as a meditation in which we give away our body, our possessions, and roots of virtue. So giving away our body, in that we meditate on not only making our body useful to others, spending time with others, working for the sake of others, even working hard, exerting ourselves, even changing oil in other people's car, fixing other people's car. So we can meditate on that. Maybe that would be good way of being generous with others. But anyway, meditating on giving away our body without any sense of loss. Um, Giving things that are dear to our heart, things that we have accumulated in our life, starting small, giving away things that we do not cling to very strongly, or creating habits and being able to over time give things which are bigger and bigger, and even giving away our own happiness and the causes of our own happiness, the roots of virtues, starting with people that we know that will find it easy to give to. So when you think of your partner, when you think of your children, when you think of other people that are important to you in your life, you think that actually I can give away my own happiness for the sake of others. I can give away my own comfort for the sake of others. If I feel uncomfortable, if I feel some degree of pain at the moment, it's okay. I can bear it because the other person that is important to me in my life is happy at the moment. I can do that. That's, in some sense, giving away our roots of virtue for the sake of others. And so when we train in our mind in meditation, in thinking and visualizing that we're doing it, we're reducing a willingness to give. Sorry, we're developing a willingness to give. And when we're developing a willingness to give, we train in generosity, and over time, we reduce the sense of attachment and clinging that we have to things in our life, to possessions, to our own comfort, to our own free time, and so forth. We, in our heart, find more space to listen to others and to be generous with them. So that's a meditation on generosity. It's really helpful in terms of reducing attachment. And finally, we have a meditation on selflessness. The Buddhist topic of selflessness. And so when we think of selflessness, when we meditate on selflessness, we recognize that whatever we're attached to, whatever might be the object in front of us, if it's another person, if it's a material thing, but also if it's a certain value in our life, if it's this sense of praise and fame, good name that we have made for ourselves, if it's our own identity as who we are, if we attach to that strongly and think that without that, how will I be able to be happy in my life? When we meditate on selflessness, we can see that whatever we're attached to doesn't exist in and of itself by its own power, doesn't have a core of being, an identity that is fixed and solid, unchanging, existing in and of itself, but it's just a fabrication of my own mind. For those of you who have done some study of selflessness before, the Buddhist topic of selflessness, of emptiness, I guess that you feel more or less that you maybe know what I'm talking about. But for those of you who hear about selflessness or emptiness for the first time or for the first few times, it sounds pretty foreign. Basically, when we think of, for example, if we try to think of um, something that you're attached to, like either another person, um, another um, another person, a certain object, a new car, new bank account, really flashy bank account, um, nice house, holidays, or what have you. There's that idea in our mind that there's something ingrained within that object that exists in and of itself that can provide me with happiness and comfort and satisfaction and quiescence, sense of relaxation. It exists in and of itself in the object itself, inherently, as an inherent quality. So when we meditate on selflessness, one of the things that we do, we try to find that ingredient that exists in and of itself, that core of being, that being of happiness within that object that is giving us happiness and well-being. The same thing can be said also with respect to anger, and we will speak of anger in a few minutes. But now, when we think of either anger and attachment, when it's quite easy to see it in another person when we get angry with them. When we get angry with another person, it seems that the source for our unhappiness, not only our unhappiness, but others' unhappiness and discomfort, is the other person. All the misery, all the discontentment that we have in our life, looming future problems, and so forth, all of them are embodied in that person. In that we build up in our mind says this identity, which is completely disagreeable, that exists completely in and of itself by its own power, and as such, without being subject to change, without being controlled by cause and conditions, without depending upon certain social constructs, social background, without having cause and conditions that have triggered certain behavior. But in our mind, a person seems to be existing like that in and of itself by their own power, and also without having any possibility to change in the future. And so meditating on selflessness is trying to, amongst other things, to try to find that identity and put a finger on it, on that ingredient that exists completely by itself. So when you think of that person in your life that you find completely disagreeable, and we live at a time in which we're controlled by social media, by the narratives, by the news, and so forth. So there's always someone that outside that seems to be that disagreeable person that is so distasteful that you will never come to like that person. Definitely in politics, modern day in politics, it's like that. And so when we think of the core of that person, is it that what makes that person so disagreeable? Is it their body? Is it their mind? Is it their speech? Is it their actions? When we go deeper into that, is it, no, of course, it's not necessarily the body. Um, is it the way that they speak? Is it the way that they behave? Um, is the speech of that person, whatever they say, is it the person themselves? or are they just words? Is what they do, is it the person themselves, or is it just the things that they do? Is it a state of mind that motivates whatever they say or whatever they do? Are that person the actual mind? Are that person anger? Are they the embodiment of anger? Are they attachment? Are they bigotry? Are they close-mindedness? Are they in divisive attitude? Of course, the person might have all of these attitudes present in their mind, but in our mind, the type of idea that we have of that person is that um, the person's identity is completely conflated with those negative states of mind or negative actions, the way that they speak or the way that they behave. So when we try to pin down in our mind what is, where is that person that is completely disagreeable, we can recognize that the behavior is negative, but the person that exists in and of themselves as being completely disagreeable cannot be found within their actions, verbal actions, physical actions, mental actions, mental activities. The person is a person that has a body, speech, and mind that acts in a certain way, but none of them exist in and of themselves. None of them exist by their own right, but they're controlled by cause and conditions. They're controlled also by the way that they were brought up, the way that they were conditioned to behave. They're controlled by karmic imprints that they brought with them from previous lifetimes and so forth. And so since that person doesn't exist as such in and of themselves, there's also a possibility to change. And the possibility to change might not be a vile possibility for the time being. Like when I think of people from the political sphere, I don't know if bringing up Trump at the moment is the right thing to do. So I will speak about, I live in Australia, although I grew up in Israel. I've been away from Israel for 25 years and so forth. But still, I read the news from time to time, particularly at turbulent times like that. And I think that the current leadership in Israel is totally dismal, dysfunctional and dismal. So when I think of, for example, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think that there is a possibility of changing, but also to be realistic about it, he's 75 years old and is likely to not become Buddha in his very lifetime, let alone not become Buddha in this very lifetime. It is very unlikely that he will change dramatically and drastically in the time that he still have left. So while it is unrealistic to think that that will happen, possibility is still there because he's not someone that is damaged down to his very core. I mean, he has massive issues, massive flaws, and is responsible for the death of so many people, for the destruction of so many people. But still, it's not ingrained within his very identity, very being. And so there is a possibility of changing. So it's easy to recognize that with people that we disagree with, people that we dislike, people that we hate. It's more difficult to recognize that with respect to the people that we are attached to, that also they do not exist in and of themselves. And also the things that we are attached to, they do not exist in and of themselves. They depend upon cause and conditions, and as such, they are impermanent, subject to disintegration. The quality of happiness, the quality of comfort, the quality of relaxation is not ingrained within the things that we're attached to. It's just what a mind makes of them. It's just in their attitude, the relationship that we have within them that can give us happiness and well-being and comfort and so forth. So meditating on selflessness is useful long term in reducing a sense of clinging and attachment. It's not easy. It's not one meditation, one time off. It's not going to do the work. But over time, when we remind ourselves that things do not exist in and of themselves independently, when things do not exist independently in and of themselves, we can use that in order to reduce sense of attachment that we have to others. Coffee finish. Coffee is finished. Now I'm drinking tea. Okay. And so um, let's look at anger. So in Buddhist language, Buddhist terminology, there are different words that we use for anger. And so, for example, one common word for anger in Tibetan is kondro. Another word that we sometimes use is shedang. Shedang is translated as hatred. But there are other words that are used in Buddhist terminology which are related to anger. In English, we use anger, hostility, hatred, aversion, disdain, and so forth. Tsongkhapa in Islam Rinpoche says that hostility means observing origins of suffering, such as living beings, other people, or animals. So observing other living beings, also observing pain, weapons, thorns, and so forth, and giving rise to a harsh, tormented mind that contemplates harming these objects. And minds and mental factors and other Buddhist texts, which we often use, says anger is a malice. Maybe A is not needed. Anger is malice towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena that are sources of suffering. And so I think one important point to make in relation to anger is that anger is necessarily involved with malice, with the intention to harm. And it's important to say that because I think that in general, when we, for us, um, when we converse in English, we have a certain idea of what anger means. Anger holds a certain meaning to us. The word itself holds a certain meaning, but the Buddhist terminology, the Buddhist meaning of anger might be slightly different. So from a Buddhist perspective, anger is definitely involved with the intention to harm something, someone, or something. But for us, when we see a situation that is unjust, is not right, and we think that it is not right, it is not just, and therefore I need to change it. We think that becoming angry about that situation is what motivates me to change it. And so there is a positive sense of anger that we need to have that is not involved with wanting to harm something. And only when we develop that sense of anger, I can fix a certain thing. So what I'm saying is that from a language perspective, in the way that we use the word anger, it can become confusing. Anger from a Buddhist perspective is definitely negative. It's definitely involved with the intention to harm. Whereas just from the point of view of how we use language, English, in English at least, anger might not necessarily always involve with the intention to harm. And so it's good to make that comment, that point in our mind, because often when we have conversations with others about anger, the point of saying that, but only if you really become upset about or angry about something that is not right, about discrimination, about bigotry, about inequality, only then you can do something about it. So being mindful of the way that we use language in Buddhism and in common everyday life, we can think about, rather than thinking of having to be angry in order to change a certain situation, we can think of, I'm upset about it. When you're upset about something, it does not necessarily involve with intention to harm it. So you see, you face a certain situation, you become upset. Your mind is wholly disturbed by it, and you think that this is not right. I need to change it. You can be upset without wanting to harm it. And so, as Tsongkhapa said, as Monumental Factor says, anger, hostility, resentment, and so forth. They're always involved with a sense of harm. And so, there are things, there are other mental processes in Buddhist scriptures which are associated with anger, like wrath or belligerence, is malice, that wishes to harm by striking and so forth, when any of the 9 bases of malice abides nearby. If you wonder what are the 9 bases of malice, often we speak of, for example, those that are, the things which are, we think of ourselves, this is me, we think of the things which are close to my heart, my relatives and so forth, and my enemies. So those who are harming me, those are harming my friends, or those who are helping my enemies, those that have done it in the past, those that are doing it at the present, those that will do it in the future. All of them are those which I dislike. I don't like those who are harming me, those who are close to my heart, or those who are helping my enemies. I don't like that they've done it in the past, and I'm not going to be happy if they're going to do it in the future. So malice that wishes to harm them, that's wrath. Then we have resentment, a mind that refusing to let go of a continuum of anger wishes to harm or retaliate. I'm totally, no, I've mastered resentment. I have that. Not that much anymore, but I guess that everyone can recall events in their life in which they resented someone, wishing to harm them in the future or to get back at them when they find an opportunity. So next one is spite, the wish through the force of belligerence and resentment to speak harsh words out of ill will to another who has pointed out a fault in us, or a fault in someone that is close to our heart. Then we have jealousy. Jealousy is also under the umbrella of anger or hostility. This is deep disturbance of a mind that cannot tolerate another's attitude or source or success, attachment and honor. Harmfulness is an unmerciful wish to harm other sentient beings. Involving anger, it is a lack of compassion, as in wanting to harm or to cause others to harm, or in taking delight when seeing or hearing of harm to sentient beings. Anyway, we don't need to spend too much time in looking at those different definitions of mental processes. And so, since anger is definitely necessarily involved with the intention to harm others, and I think that all of us have had occasions in our life in which we have been angry. In order to reduce the sense of anger in our life, we can, first of all, recognize the detrimental effects of anger. That's the first step. For so long as we refuse, or we cannot really recognize that anger is a destructive emotion, we will not be inclined to develop tools to reduce anger and aggression. So first off, I think that when we think of anger, we can think of events in our life in which we got angry. I'm now in my mid 50s, So I can definitely have enough to work with. I can recall so many events in my life in which I was unhappy because of anger. That in some sense I was completely out of control. And so I can recognize that anger is not a pleasant emotion. It's actually quite painful. When a mind is full of anger and resentment and hostility, it's unbearable sometimes. And I think that all of us can relate to how uncomfortable anger is. With attachment is different because attachment presents itself as sometimes as a comfortable emotion. In that attachment is there to give us happiness and to make us comfortable, to make us a person that is completely complete. But with anger, it's a different story because we can see directly that anger is not a comfortable emotion. But also, we have, I think, maybe more scientific evidence that anger is a negative emotion that over time damages our physical well-being, not only our mental well-being, but also physically. It's not a comfortable emotion. It's not a healthy emotion. It is honest that Dalai Lama often says that in his conversations with contemporary scientists, they've pointed out that anger over time is something that also erodes the immune system, undermines our immune system. So thinking of recognizing the drawbacks of anger, that's the first one. But also what we can think of the things that we do under the influence of anger, under the control of anger. I mean, there are so many things that I would have liked to go back in the past and unsay things, undo things that I did under this way of anger. When I think of having arguments and fights with my siblings when we were younger, when we were teenagers and so forth. All of us are now adults. When I think of my sister, we have, very good relationships, but still, when I think of the things that I said when I was in my teenage years, sometimes I cringe. I wish that I did not say them. Of course, none of us really hold on to those things that we've said in the past, but still, I feel so uncomfortable. And also other arguments and fights that I had with others later on in my life when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s. We regret the things that we have said and done under the influence of anger, and some of them cannot be undone. So it's easy to recognize the drawbacks of anger in relation to them. It's easy to recognize that we're completely out of control under the sway of anger. When you look at that, actually, I think that I've wrote down the drawbacks of anger. Yeah, let's use that. Oh, just a second. I'll correct the spelling mistake. All right. So I spoke of anger, hostility, resentment, and both mental and physical pain. It also causes the destruction of virtue. So when you look at Buddhist texts, Buddhist scriptures, such as, for example, Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva Way of Life, a text that is very, one of the classics, very common text in network of centers. It is said at the beginning of the 6th chapter, in the very first word, that anger destroys roots of virtue that we have accumulated over countless eons, hundreds or thousands of eons. This is something that a great Indian master, another one, Chandrakirti, have mentioned in his supplement to the Middle Way. And so it is an unseen advantage of anger that we don't see karma directly. We don't see the karmic imprints that we have planted in the mind stream. We don't see them directly. They don't take a physical form, but Buddhist scripture point out that so many positive things that we have done for countless eons are eradicated by anger, by one moment of anger. And so I don't see that happening in a physical sense. But then when I think of the things that I have learned within the Buddhist tradition, not only learned in an academic way, intellectual way, but also the experiences in my life that I've developed over the years. And think about it in a Buddhist perspective, I can see the truth in or the truth in Pearl in so many of the things that the Buddha have taught. And so I can also then start to think of Shantideva and um, Chandrakirti pointing out that anger is destroying roots of virtue, and thinking that even if I don't see that happening directly in a physical sense in my life, I can still take that seriously, take that as the word or someone issuing a warning to me and thinking that it does destroy the merit and the virtue that I've created in my life, not only in this life, but also in previous lifetimes. And so I really have to um, I have to control my mind. And so anger destroys roots of virtue, but also, as I said, it motivates destructive, negative actions, things that we deeply regret over time. It hinders the development of wisdom. It also blocks the wisdom that we might have at the moment. For I think that when our mind gets completely out of control with anger, we don't see clearly what's happening in front of us. Our mind becomes so so unclear, so vague. Um, we can only see one part of reality, one side of reality. We cannot see the bigger picture. So anger hinders wisdom, not only at the present, but also when we hold on to anger, to resentment, we refuse to let go. It also robs us of practical wisdom that could have been of help in terms of untangling whatever difficulty or complexity we're experiencing at the moment. So we become, in some sense, we become more stupid in terms of working out the problems that we have in our life. We cannot develop skillful means because the mind is totally limited by anger. I mean, it happens to me. It happened to me, and unfortunately, it still happens to me. But also, in terms of developing long-term wisdom, wisdom in a Buddhist sense, the one that will help us to get out of samsara. Um, it also hinders that type of wisdom. Greg is saying, um, what did the scriptures say on biological impact, changing someone from a virtuous state to being one of a neurological damage and anger, like a child traumatized in a war zone? Is it still loss of our roots of virtue, though the biology is overriding the intention? And so the way that they speak about it in, I think, in Buddhist scripture, is quite different to the way that we speak about it in everyday language. In Buddhist scripture, particularly dating back to the time of the Buddha, and also over the centuries, looking at great Indian masters and great Tibetan masters, they don't speak of traumas in a way that we speak of traumas in our modern day. There is no post-traumatic syndrome, the terminology that you find in Buddhist scriptures. So the Buddha did not speak about it. Indian masses does not speak about it, but it does not mean to say that we cannot find related topics in Buddhist scriptures and bring them into our modern day discussion. And so what you do find in Buddhist scriptures is the topic of imprints. How imprints shape the way that we see reality and experience realities. And so when I think of traumas, post-traumatic syndromes manifesting in our life on account of traumas that we have accumulated in our life, we can say that from a Buddhist perspective, we are speaking about imprints and mental habits that we've developed. So the Buddhist techniques that can help us to undo some of the habits or developing some emotional response to which is more wholesome in dealing with traumas. But I think that honestly, modern day therapy and psychology have also very powerful tools that can help us to deal with traumas. Immediate intervention, and often using a combination of Buddhist techniques, but also modern day interventions to deal with traumas or traumatic response is pretty useful. And so there is, of course, a biological response to a certain trauma, either freezing up, seizing up, or giving rise to a state of mind of no, fight or flight. Definitely, it manifests in our body in a certain way on account of having an emotional response to that. And so I think that Buddhism doesn't suggest maybe immediate intervention techniques to that. It's good to rely upon therapy, modern day tools. And I think also to supplement that long term with things that we find in the Buddhist tradition, maybe in that way it can become more comprehensive. I think that maybe those of you who have background in mental health have maybe a better understanding of what I'm saying. Anyone has a background of mental health that can maybe speak about it? All right.
You're spot
Karen?
on. You're absolutely spot on.
All right. Hmm. So, Greg, you're asking, is it still a loss of roots of virtue, even though the biology is overriding the intention? Yeah, I can say yes. Any moment of anger or hatred that is arising in our mind, in which we have that intention to harm others, is a destruction of roots of virtue. But I'm not saying that is no. It might seem to be in some sense unfair, but when you look at it from a Buddhist perspective, it doesn't really deal with that in terms of fairness, whether it is right or wrong. When we are controlled by anger, it does not make us inherently evil. When we are controlled by anger, because we have had previous trauma, or just because we have imprints that have been activated in our mind stream, it means that currently our mind is out of control and we find ourselves in a state in which we're worthy of compassion. Anyone that has no control over their life, whether they're, in general, whether they're a completely functioning person, or whether the person responds with anger because they have previous trauma, irrespective of the background. Anyone that is out of control is an object of compassion. And compassion from a Buddhist perspective is that state of mind in which we think, may that person be happy. May they find the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering. May they be free from the cause of suffering. And so whether we are completely functioning people without any background in of trauma, or whether it is trauma that has triggered a negative emotion, anger is still destroying roots of virtue, and therefore we are totally an object of compassion. Yeah, so there's no sense of unfairness in that. But also I think that if someone, I guess, someone comes from a disadvantaged situation, background, in which they have deep traumas in their life, maybe the person is actually deserving even a greater sense of compassion, a greater sense of attention, um, a greater sense of intervention, trying to do something for for the sake of that person, because definitely it's a terrible thing to go through. And if there's anything that we can do for the sake of that person, yeah, we should do it. Yeah. So that's what those are my thoughts about the issue for the time being. Um, if I look um, at other drawbacks of anger, it affects the physical well-being, definitely. And it destroys our relationships and a good reputation. Um, I can come up with examples in my life of at least two, three situations in which anger destroyed the good relationship that I had with others. I mean, anger on my account. I've said something, I behaved in a destructive way, which made that relationship being either irrecoverable, um, or even if I managed to make amends, still it's not as it was before. So anger destroys relationships, but also a good reputation. No one wants to be around someone that has that destructive behavior, that is raging. And so thinking of ways in which we can apply antidotes to anger in order to be less affected by anger. First of all, anything will begin with recognizing the drawbacks of anger. But then the thing is that when we already become angry, we don't find the leisure, the opportunity to just lean back on a chair or cross our legs and kind of sit in meditation and think of the drawbacks of anger. I mean, when anger is such an energetic, powerful emotion that it's almost impossible to kick back and relax and think of the disadvantages of anger. And so this is something that we have to do regularly. At a time in which things are hunky-dory and we are not enraged, it's good to kind of remind ourselves from time to time that anger is a destructive emotion, or at least when we start to feel discontented, when we start to feel unhappy, to remind ourselves that the next step could be anger. And this is where I have to start with reducing my unhappiness. Shantideva says in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life that the cause of anger is mental unhappiness. So there are two ways in which a mind becomes unhappy. It's when we do not get what we want. That's one thing, not getting what we want. And the second one is getting what we do not want. So a mind becomes unhappy and the fuel of anger is present. So when Shantideva in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life in the 6th chapter gives us strategies for developing patience, what he's actually doing is looking at the mental unhappiness and says, let's address mental unhappiness. When a mind is unhappy, when we get what we do not want or we do not get what we want, If we can reduce that mental unhappiness, we can prevent the mind from developing the intention to harm others. And so if we become mindful, if we remember the drawbacks of anger, at a time in which our mind is starting to kind of be uncomfortable, develop that sense of malaise, discontent, if we can raise a red flag, right? Red flag, red card. No, it's like red card in my mind. Anger is about to arise. I'm not getting what I want. I'm getting what I do not want. Then anger will arise. It will make me unhappy physically and mentally. It will destroy my roots of virtue. I will say something that will be of harm to other person. I will not be able to take it back, maybe, and so on and so forth. We'll have a better chance of trying to apply positive antidotes to it. It's not easy. I mean, anger is such an energetic, powerful emotion that it's not easy to do it. But over time, if we habituate ourselves with recognizing the sense of discomfort that arises in our mind, we'll have a better chance of doing it. And so then looking at antidotes to anger. So meditating on the force of anger, that's what I spoke of now. But then meditating on impermanence is so powerful, I think, in terms of reducing a sense of anger, particularly when we think of things which are bother our mind, things which really disturb our mind in a deeper way. When we think of impermanence, when we think of death and impermanence, it can be very powerful. So thinking of grudges that we hold in our life. Do we want to die with a mind that bears a grudge? Do we want to die with a mind that is hateful? Do we want to die with a mind that is angry? Do we want to die with a mind that cannot let go, that cannot forgive? Now, when I think that when a life is quite comfortable, and I assume that maybe for many of us, maybe for most of us, maybe for all of us, we don't have strong anger now present in our mind at the moment, something that we cannot let go of. But if we do have something as such happening to us at the moment, we can think, do I really want to hold on to that? And so um, let me try to think of what I said. So I spoke about impermanence. So very powerful reflection that could be of use at a time in which we feel anger, but also at a time in which we feel that we cannot let go of anger, we cannot forgive, we have a sense of resentment, is to think of death and impermanence. To think of, will I still feel the same if I would die tomorrow or next week or next month? Does it still matter to me in such a powerful way? Do I want to die with a mind that cannot let go? Do I want to die with a resentful state of mind? Do I want to die without solving or resolving that situation? And given that maybe I have maybe 1 month to live, or maybe 1 year to live, do you really want to spend that time in investing so much mental energy in not being able to let go? So really thinking of death and impermanence is such a powerful reorganizer of our priorities. And it's not easy. it's not easy to do it because with anger, with being incapable of letting go, our mind is becoming, our wisdom is so impeded. It's not easy to think about it, but still, when we think of how it'd be like to die without being able to let go, it can be of great help in reducing that degree of anger. But just as well, when we think of the person that we are angry with, if it's someone that was very close to our heart, one of the family members or a close friend of ours, how it'd be like to die. If they die, if they pass away without us having had a chance to work out that situation. So both of my parents have passed away a long time ago. And um, I didn't have like unresolved issues with them. I didn't have situations in which I don't have any things that I hold on to in which I think that I wish we have worked out that issues before they passed away. But still, I wish that I was more mindful of death and impermanence while they were alive, so that we would have had way better relationships, or no, that we would have been able to let go of things and not make a big deal out of them, not make big dramas out of things which are not that important in the great scheme of things. And so thinking of death and impermanence is really powerful in terms of um, being able to let go of certain things which are painful. Of course, there are, since Greg brought up trauma, or certain things that might have happened to us in the past, there are things which are difficult to work out, some things which are complicated. But still, I think that when we think of death and impermanence and the choices that we make in our life, we can maybe find more rooms to develop a sense of forgiveness, or at least being able to let go of things that can no longer be changed. But also, another aspect of meditating on death and impermanence, or let's put aside the death part of it, meditating on impermanence is thinking that when we get angry because our mind imputes a sense of permanence onto an object, as if whatever we get angry with, it has always been like that and will always stay like that without seeing the possibility of change. And so when I speak about it in a general sense, um, it becomes really um, really difficult to sometimes to think of practical application. Just a second. Sorry. But when I think about it, for example, in terms of politics, we get angry at a certain situation in not being able to see the possibility of change. Yeah, so something might be terrible at the moment, but thinking about it in terms of historical perspective, we can definitely see that government are formed and government pass away, to go away. Leaders rise to power and then they lose the power. People that had terrible policies in the past have changed the ways in certain situations. Not always, but it happens. And so it's also a good thing to remind ourselves when we get angry. Now, the possibility of change is there. And so if it is possible, for things if things are subject to cause and conditions are subject to change, the hope is always there. Of course, we also need to be realistic. I mean, when I think about um, the current political system in Israel or the current political system in the US, if when I think of Israel, it is unrealistic to think that Benjamin Netanyahu will become a bodhisattva in the foreseeable future. It's completely delusional, I think, from my side to think that that will happen. And just as well, um, if you dislike Trump, I have some of my Buddhist friends that think that Trump is a bodhisattva. But also I have some of my Buddhist friends that think that, it's like quite a troublesome person. So if you think that, it's a troublesome person, it's bringing so much pain and destruction, to the US at the moment or to the world at large, yeah, it is possible, change is possible. It is possible that he will become a bodhisattva in the future, but likely not in the foreseeable future. Unlikely for that to happen in the next year or two, I think. So possibility is there, but unlikely to happen like straight away. And so then, but still thinking of impermanence, it's recognizing that the potential is still there. Possibility is still there. And so that could be one powerful tool for dealing with anger, resentment, and so forth. And meditating on loving kindness is also important. Because when we meditate on loving kindness to another person, we think, first off, that person is just like me. Even though the behavior is terrible, even though they're bringing so much harm to other people, still internally, that person is just like me in that they're seeking happiness and well-being. And they want to be free from pain and suffering. And the way that they try to accomplish that is terrible. But they're behaving in such a way because they're under the sway of their destructive emotions, under the sway of ignorance, of partiality, of hatred, of anger, of pride, of jealousy, and so forth. And those afflictive emotions rob them of discrimination, of wisdom. And it happens to me just as well. My anger, my attachment, my pride, my jealousy, my ignorance, they also rob me of the opportunity to have wisdom in what I do. Maybe to a lesser effect of the person that I'm so angry with. But still, when I think of myself and that other person, we're alike in wanting to be happy, wanting to be well in every moment in our life. In every moment of our life, I want to be free from suffering and pain. And just like that other person, when my mind is governed by afflictive emotions, I'm out of control. I end up harming myself, I end up harming others, and I end up creating further cause and conditions for my own unhappiness and suffering. And so developing loving kindness to the other person is, first of all, recognizing that equality between myself and others, and also trying to be genuine in my wish to that other person to be well. And to be well is to wish for them to have not only happiness, but mainly the causes of happiness. So when we think of particularly, since I mentioned modern day politics, when I think of developing the wish for others to be happy, for our leaders to be happy, or for their supporters to be happy. It's not wishing, it's not rewarding them for their negative behavior. It's rather than thinking that if I wish them to have the cause of happiness, I wish them to have wisdom, I wish them to have compassion, I wish them to have love, I wish them to have a generous, magnanimous attitude. I wish them to have ethics, all those things which contribute to happiness and well-being. But also, if they have the summation of all of this, it means that they will not be destructive to others. I mean, I will not be destructive to others. I will not harm others if I have love and compassion and patience and generosity and ethics. There's no way that I will come to harm others if I do possess those positive qualities. So actually, it's a very useful and selfless attitude to have, to think that may they have the cause of happiness. If they have causes of happiness, if they have happiness, they will stop harming others. So that sense of loving kindness is really crucial. And then thinking that if I do have those wishes in my heart for them to be happy and to have the cause of happiness, if there are ways that I can help to bring, to create that in their life, I shall do that. And so, of course, in terms of modern day politics, I have no ways to make Benjamin Netanyahu develop love and compassion towards others, because it's not amongst the circle of my friends. I mean, let alone it's not in the circle of my friends. We don't live in the same country. I don't live in Israel. So, I'm not delusional. I don't have ways to, I don't have the means to influence him directly, but I have ways to influence the people around me, not to preach, not to lecture them about becoming a better person, but I can, in my behavior, embody the qualities that I want to have in my life, in other people. Now, if I want others to be free of negative attitudes, if I work on myself and through having less ignorance, less anger, lesser pride, lesser miserliness, lesser aggression, I'll be able to not only show others, be an example to others, but also have better techniques, skillful means in being able to affect others, in helping them to overcome these destructive attitudes. And so meditating on loving kindness, in developing that sense of closeness to others, things that really, they're not very different to me, but at the very core of them, they're very similar to me. Trying to develop that sense of closeness is a powerful technique in reducing anger and aggression. Now, there's some other things that I wanted to speak of today, but we're really running out of time. And I have a meeting in 15 minutes with the General Secretary here at Cherubling. And so now I'm here at Cherubling in India. And Tai Situ Rinpoche, the head honcho, if that's a Buddhist term, head honcho of Cherubling, I met him with a group of Israeli friends that I brought along to attend teachings, and it came up with that idea of maybe visiting Israel next year to give some Buddhist teachings. And so there was that moment of elation that arose in my mind. And then the next moment was complete panic, sheer panic about someone like that visiting, organizing a visit of someone like that in a place that is beset by war and conflicts. And so in 50 minutes, I'm meeting the general manager here in Cherubling and looking at the practicalities of making that happen. I'm still controlled by panic, but might happen. Who knows? And so, unfortunately, I have to finish off for today. Please don't be angry with me. And so I'm going to finish up with, first of all, thanking all of you for showing up this morning, but also showing up in the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks in which we've had the opportunity to look at anger, attachment, and ignorance, and speak of, I think, things which, at least for me, were practical tools for me in my life. Thank you very much for Shela, for being Mother Superior. And also, thank you everyone else for helping directly and indirectly with the activities of Thubten Nobeling. Very much for the engine, Dundrup, and all the other people that are involved with Thubten Nobeling, with the teachers of Thubten Nobeling. I think that many of you draw inspiration from Geshe Sherab, so thumbs up for Geshe Sherab for being there directly and indirectly. And we've ended up with dedicating whatever positive potential we have generated in sitting together, meditating together, speaking together of those issues, those points. I'm going to put on the screen some words of dedication in which we can dedicate our merit. And so we can think that whatever positive potential we have developed in thinking, conversing, trying to apply those teachings to situations in our life, may they contribute to a greater sense of compassion that we could extend to ourselves and others, so that we create all the cause and conditions for the flourishing of bodhicitta, the intention to become Buddha, for the sake of all living beings to the extent to the reaches of space. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, which means that may I become free from faults and embody all positive qualities for the welfare of others, and so that I will lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. So thank you very much, everyone. And may we meet again before too long. I shall talk to your people, and they will talk to my people, and we'll try to make that happen before too long. All right. So